My name is Isla, and I'm 32. The crystal chandeliers at the Coral Gables Country Club were so bright they made every wine glass look like a weapon. It was my parents' 40th anniversary, a night that was supposed to celebrate love and legacy. Instead, I stood near the buffet, feeling like a ghost at my own family's party. My sister Nyan drifted toward me like she owned the air. She looked flawless in a silk designer gown, laughing with a billionaire investor my father had been chasing for months. Then, right as she passed, she tripped on the marble floor. Red wine exploded across my pale dress, soaking through the fabric like a fresh wound. The room went dead silent. Nayan gasped with perfect timing. One manicured hand over her mouth. She leaned in close, breath sweet with Cabernet and malice. I dare you to disappear for a few days. Isla, she whispered, so only I could hear. Let's see if even a dog misses you. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't reach for a napkin. I looked her straight in the eye and felt something settle in me. Calm and final. Challenge accepted, I said. Then I walked out, wine dripping down my legs, past my father's red face and my mother's lowered gaze, and into the humid Florida night. Nain thought she'd won. She didn't realize I wasn't just disappearing. I was waking up. I climbed into my 1985 Mercedes-Benz 300D, the interior smelling like old leather and the faint lavender perfume my grandmother used to wear. That car was the only thing she managed to keep in her own name before she passed, and it was the only place I could breathe without performing. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. 32 years old, and I still felt like the same invisible 12-year-old who used to hide in the pantry to avoid Nayan's taunts. Because for 10 years, I was the one in the hospice room. I was the one feeding my grandmother ice chips and listening to her stories when her voice got thin. My father, Julian, and Nayan were always busy. Closing deals. Attending fundraisers. Chasing status. They called my grandmother a legacy burden. Like love was an inconvenience. 3 years ago, Julian sat me down when I was juggling 3 freelance jobs and living on caffeine. He handed me a stack of papers and called it a disclaimer of interest. He said it was a legal formality to help him manage a small plot of land my grandmother owned. I was too tired to fight. I trusted the man who raised me. So I signed. What I didn't know was Julian wasn't trying to manage land. He was trying to erase me from the map entirely, so he could drain my grandmother's estate and fund Nayan's social climbing without anyone questioning it. That night, after the gala, I stared at a thick cream envelope on my passenger seat. The one a law firm had mailed me the week before. It wasn't a threat. It was a warning. My grandmother had a plan, and Julian had no idea. I didn't waste time trying to guess passwords or hack encrypted files. That's for movies. In real life, you let people get comfortable. Then you watch them slip. My father is predictable. He thinks he's a genius, but he's a creature of habit. Last month, using my small landscaping business as a cover, I gifted Julian a smart irrigation system for his precious garden. He loved it because it made him feel modern. What he didn't understand was that it also acted as a bridge into the house Wi-Fi. Every morning, Julian sat in the gazebo with a cigar and his tablet, logging into private accounts like he was untouchable. From my apartment downtown, I watched the system handshake. I watched his logins. I didn't need to hack him. He gave me the door. I just walked through it. But the real gold wasn't digital. It was physical. Julian kept a leather-bound ledger in his desk. Because men like him love paper when the paper makes them feel powerful. I met with Marcus, an independent trustee connected to the Padilla Family Trust. He didn't offer pity. He offered facts. He told me my grandmother was 10 steps ahead of everyone. She inserted a spendthrift provision into her irrevocable trust. Marcus said, "It's a kill switch. If the trustee ever defrauds a beneficiary or uses trust assets to cover personal debts, he's removed automatically. No debate." Then Marcus slid a folder across the table. One look made my breath catch. $12 million in combined assets. The house, the land, liquid funds. Everything my family acted like was theirs. And the balance history showed the truth. Julian was draining it. Quietly. Steadily. To prop up his failing construction company. He thought he was locked in as trustee. He thought my signature on that disclaimer meant the door was sealed. Marcus looked at me and said, "He doesn't realize the hinges are rotten." That's when I disappeared for real. Not dramatic. Not announced. I stopped answering calls. I stopped showing up to play my role. I let Nyan enjoy the silence she thought proved she was right. Within a week, Julian and Nyan announced an exclusive estate sale. They were trying to sell the Coral Gables mansion and liquidate everything inside it. Antiques. Furniture. Even the house itself. So Julian could pour the equity into his collapsing firm. Watching it through the reactivated Nest camera my grandmother once let me use felt like watching vultures circle a living thing. Nyan tagged my grandmother's furniture with price stickers like it was junk. Julian practiced his pitch in the mirror, like he was auditioning for a new life. Then my mother, Martha, shifted the entire game. For 35 years, she had been a shadow, agreeing with Julian to keep the peace, smiling at Nyan's cruelty, staying quiet so the fire wouldn't touch her. 2 days after the gala, I sent her a single audio file, a recording from the gazebo. Julian and Nyan were laughing over clinking scotch glasses. Julian's voice was clear. "Once the house sells, we'll move Martha into that budget facility near the interstate. She won't know the difference. It'll save us $3,000 a month." Nyan giggled. "She's lived in luxury long enough. It's our turn." That night, Martha didn't confront them. She waited until Julian passed out, then took the master key from his bedside table, walked into his office, and pulled the ledgers. The real books. The ones Julian used to hide the trust thefts. She met me at a diner at Trey. Null M. Hands shaking as she slid the heavy leather binder across the Formica table. "Isla," she whispered, voice cracking. "I spent my life being quiet. I thought if I stayed silent, the fire wouldn't touch me, but they were planning to burn me alive." I gripped her hand. "The fire's out. Mom, I'm holding the hose now." When I opened that ledger, it was worse than I expected. Forged signatures, loans taken against trust assets, payments to predatory lenders. Julian and Nyan were so convinced of their brilliance they left a paper trail a mile long. They thought they were predators. They didn't realize I was already at the door. The estate sale happened on a humid Saturday. Luxury SUVs packed the driveway. Inside, 200 of Coral Gables' elite wandered through the halls with wine glasses, eyeing my grandmother's antiques like they were picking over a corpse. Julian stood at the top of the grand staircase in his most expensive suit, smiling like a man who thought he was untouchable. Nyan played grieving daughter for a billionaire investor. Voice soft, eyes wet on command. I didn't sneak in. I walked through the front doors with Marcus, and 2 forensic auditors in dark suits. The room didn't just go quiet. It felt like the air got pulled out. "The auction is over," I said. Not loud, but sharp enough to cut through the crowd. "This estate is not for sale." Julian's face turned a shade of purple I'd never seen. "Isla, what is this embarrassment? Get out before I have security throw you out." Marcus stepped forward, voice like cold stone. "Actually, Julian, we're the ones with security, and we're the ones with the warrant." Julian tried to laugh. It sounded like choking. "Non," he said. "You can't do this. This is our house." I didn't argue. I walked to the big media screen Nyan had set up for the sale and tapped my phone. The garden gazebo feed flared onto the screen. Then the audio rolled. Julian's voice. Crisp and undeniable. Admitting he forged documents. Laughing about erasing me. Talking about draining the trust to save his business. The billionaire investor physically stepped back from him, like fraud was contagious. Julian lunged toward the screen. The auditors intercepted him before he could touch it. Marcus didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Under the spendthrift provision of the Padilla Irrevocable Trust, Julian Padilla is hereby removed as trustee for gross financial misconduct and fraud. Effective immediately. Then he turned to the stunned crowd and delivered the final knife. Isla Padilla is the sole administrator of this estate. Nayan let out a shrill scream, the kind that happens when status breaks. No, you can't. This is my life. Marcus handed her a legal document. This is a 4-hour notice of eviction. You have until noon tomorrow to remove your personal effects. Anything left becomes property of the trust. I leaned in close to Nayan, just like she'd done to me at the gala. I took your challenge, I whispered. I disappeared. And while I was gone, I made sure you'd never have a place to hide again. Julian tried one last move right there on the Persian rug. He clutched his chest and gasped, attempting a dramatic cardiac event. It was classic Julian. Pity as a weapon. Paramedics arrived in minutes. Julian was mid-groan when I stepped forward and handed the EMT my phone. Don't bother with adrenaline, I said. He was laughing about offshore accounts 5 minutes ago on livestream. His heart is fine. The EMT checked his vitals, found them perfect, and left him sitting on the floor in humiliation while the crowd watched. For the first time in my life, I didn't see a giant. I saw a small man whose mask finally melted. Martha didn't wait for the dust to settle. She walked out that evening with one suitcase and the ledgers. She filed for divorce the next morning, citing decades of financial abuse. Nayan's social circle turned on her within 24 hours. Coral Gables forgives a lot, but it doesn't forgive losers who get caught. She lost her job after the board saw the video of her helping Julian scam the trust. Last I heard, she was in a studio apartment, learning the hard way that status can't pay rent. I didn't stay to watch them beg. I renamed the estate Hawthorne Gardens. I hired a crew, but I did the planting myself. I dug into the soil and tore out weeds like I was pulling out the past. I planted white roses and lavender, the things my grandmother loved. Some people think the story is about the $12 million. It's not. It's about the moment I stopped letting my family treat me like I was optional. Final image. I stood in the center of the garden at sunset, palms moving in the breeze. I pulled that old disclaimer of interest. Julian tricked me into signing out of my pocket. I didn't rip it. I dropped it into the small fire pit. I watched the paper curl, blacken, and turn to ash while the wind carried the last of their power away. If you've ever been the invisible one and someone dared you to disappear, would you vanish quietly? Or come back with receipts? Comment. Vanish or receipts. The silence at Hawthorne Gardens isn't heavy now. It's peaceful. And I didn't get here because I was lucky. I got here because I stopped playing by the rules of a game rigged against me. If this story reminded you of your own strength, subscribe and turn on notifications. More real story times are coming.